Break-even analysis is basically where we're going to be using formulas to figure out what the break-even point is for a company. That is, what does it have to sell? How much does it have to produce in sales in order to cover its costs, both variable and fixed? That point at which sales equals variable plus fixed cost, that's the break-even point. So we'll want to be calculating that break-even point both in number of units sold, so how many of something do you have to sell to break even, and in sales dollars. So what does our sales dollars have to be in order to break even? And we're going to use what we just talked about, contribution margin, and this mathematical equation that we're going to get at in a second to calculate this break-even point. First, using the mathematical equation. This is two ways to get to the same thing. Using the mathematical equation, you can see what we just talked about. Sales equals variable cost plus fixed cost, plus net income, really. The break-even point would be the point at which sales equals these two things and net income is zero. So you're given a data set earlier on in this, higher in this set of slides, and you can remember that the sales price per unit was $500, variable cost was $300 per unit, fixed cost was $200,000. So we can solve this equation by finding Q, where Q is the number of units that we expect to sell. This 500 times Q, that represents total sales dollars. 300 times Q represents total variable costs. And then fixed costs are just fixed, so there's no amount per unit that's relevant here. So you solve this equation by subtracting 300 from both sides, and you get 200Q equals $200,000. And then dividing by 200 on both sides, you get Q equals 1,000 units. That's the break-even point. We have to sell 1,000 units at $500 a piece to cover our variable costs and our fixed costs. Okay, so that's the mathematical equation way of going about that. And remember, if you're going to use this mathematical equation, you've got to use per unit sales and variable cost amounts and multiply it by some unknown variable, which is the number of units you're expecting to sell or needing to sell. All right, you can't put total dollar amounts in here and expect to get anything valid out of this equation. The contribution margin technique just says all we have to do to break even is cover our fixed costs. So let's divide those fixed costs by contribution margin per unit, and we'll get 1,000 units. Because remember, this contribution margin per unit is the amount you have for every unit you sell that will be available to cover your fixed costs. This amount is already sales minus variable costs. Okay, so 500 minus 300. This is the amount left over to cover these costs. So for every unit you sell, you got $200 to cover this. So this cost divided by that gets you 1,000 units. To get the break-even point in dollars, well, I'll go back up in a second. To get the break-even point in dollars, you just have to cover those 200,000 of fixed costs. You divide by the contribution margin ratio now, this percentage. Remember, this 40% of the 500 in sales makes it to contribution margin per unit. So 40% of those sales dollars makes it past variable cost to cover fixed cost. So if you divide this by 40%, you get $500,000. This keeps it as a dollar amount calculation. When you divide a dollar amount by a dollar amount, you get to a number of units as in your answer. What I forgot to mention up here is to find the break-even point in sales dollars using this mathematical equation is once you have the number of units that it takes to break even, all you have to do is multiply it by the sales price per unit to get 500,000. There's a graphic way to show the break-even point right here. You can look over that, not a huge deal. Target net income is two of the exact same equations we use for break-even point, but we just add on some target profit. So this is a calculation companies will use when they want to see how much they have to sell in order to achieve a target profit level. So mathematically, you just add in the target profit you want and solve it the same way. You need 1,600 units to achieve that level of profit. Using the contribution margin method, you add the target net income to your fixed costs, and you get the same answer in units and in dollars. I'll talk about margin of safety next.